Hi, welcome to Quarantinote number 7. I could probably do this 25 times. I've got enough content from the last 22 years of this, but I don't know how many more Quarantinotes there'll be. A lot of states are reopening. There are some that are not sheltering in place, although about half, or actually more than half, I think today still are. So at least for today, there's one more quarantine note. If you're not sure why I'm doing this, please go back and check out the first one or two. You'll start to see my background, my resume. I've done a lot of work, consultation with presidents, provosts, faculty, even as a faculty member myself over the last 22 years. And I want to just present some of the best bits to you. However, today, I'm actually not going to present the best bits to you. This is new. And it came from a very specific request, two actually requests that I got this week. I was contacted by two old friends. One is a university president, in fact, the university system chancellor, who has asked some tough questions. What do I think about all the things that are happening right now? What do I think is going on? He knows that I talk to a lot of different constituents a lot of the time, in the government, in university positions, college positions, provosts, all sorts of things. And so he asked, what are my thoughts? What do I think would happen, should happen, could happen? At the same time, I was talking to a provost who asked basically the same thing. Now, in terms of what they were asking me, you know, what would I do? Sorry, wrong WWJD. You're probably thinking of the other one. Let me just clarify that. When they want to know what I would do, I'll tell you that it's a little bittersweet. You know, I heard from the provost who actually said to me on the phone, I know that universities don't really value outsiders, and anyone who has not grown up working solely in a university is often considered an outsider. And now is the time when we need outside thinking. We need outsiders to help us. At the same time, universities don't tend to embrace e-learning experts, people who are advocates of that particular medium and modality. And once again, now is the time that we really need those people to really guide us and help us. And the schools don't have a lot of them to tap into as far as resources. Well, those are two qualities that I possess. Some schools think of me as an outsider, some think of me as a learning expert, and now they're struggling because they don't have these internal resources. So with that said, I guess I will share what I think, because somebody asked. I'll tell you why I've been hesitant to do that. It actually is from a bit that I like to present, which is on the filter bubble. In fact, I would argue that one of the top 5 problems with our society today is this. Filter bubbles are a problem. We have very polarized humans in our culture. We have people who hate the other people. We have people who don't watch the same TV shows. They don't go to the same movies. They don't listen to the same radio. They don't get their news from the same places. They have different social feeds, different Facebook groups, different Twitter followers, and they hate each other. And this is really seen played out in our politics. And as a result, we have got a very politicized experience going on right now with this pandemic, when it should not be a political experience. It should be a time of coming together, of helping one another, but we're not doing that. We're taking opportunities now to say that something bad that's happening is a result of the other one, or your expert is not really good, but our expert is, or it's a mess. And so, first of all, I would encourage you to read Eli Pereira's book. It hopefully will change how you think. But it's something that I would quite honestly say education has struggled with, to convince people that we should always be looking for the other position, for the contrarian position, for the opposite position, so that we can get more data, understand, you know, how to do things better. But that's not what's happening. And so as a result, we are not making decisions we probably should make, because we're making decisions based on politics and based on ideology, and not based on things like math. So when I think of what I would do, I want to give you one last thing to consider. What you do right now is going to speak volumes, much more so than statements that you put out, than missions or visions or anything that you were to put out right now. So let me give an example of what I mean by that. When we say stuff like, well, we want our students to be successful, think about your high schoolers, right? We say that about high school students. We want them to be successful. Yet we know from all kinds of research that's come out, that ECS published something, gosh, it's almost been 5 years ago now, The average high schooler loses 1.7 hours of sleep per night because of early school start times. We are sending them to school with a brain that is essentially inebriated for much of their day because we have to get them to school to be watched because parents have to go to work. And so we set up school not to be successful for the students, but to really be successful for the parents. Similarly, we say, hey, we value learning. Higher ed says that all the time. We value learning is the number one thing. It's why students are here. And yet we know that most professors have little to no training in what learning is or how teaching affects learning. We know that most professional development is around subject matter expertise, not around teaching and learning. We know that learning is something that most higher education institutions struggle with, because when we test people after they've gone through a class or a program, they don't remember any of it. They learned almost nothing. So when we start talking about action speaking louder than words, I want to give you one other thing that has really come out a lot right now for higher ed, one more so than the other. We put student safety first. I hear this all the time. I've read it several times. Or we believe in the foundations, the underpinnings of what make up our institution, things like math. Now, when we say we put student safety first, I think back to Clay Shirky, and one of the concepts that he says that I think is really valuable, which is to say that once an organization is formed, the mission of that organization becomes the second priority, or possibly lower. The first priority always then becomes keeping the organization intact, keeping the organization sustainable and healthy. So, you know, when we start talking about reopening in the fall, let's be very, very clear. We are not putting student safety first. Typically, we are putting revenue first. We are putting money generation first. Similarly, when we say we believe in math, which means that we believe in all the things that come from math, those permutations like models and algorithms and the inputs and outputs and those sorts of things that we can start to actually quantify. When we say that we believe in math, and yet we say, you know what, we're going to reopen in the fall, no matter what. When we're saying that now, your actions speak volumes over your words. So I think you're starting to see, as I'm hedging, where I would go. And again, I'm not trying to be political about this. I'm also not trying to be alarmist about this. I'm trying to be realistic about this. Because see, I know that we do have experts out there. And as someone who is an expert in some things, I find value in those that are experts in other things. And I'm not on one side of a fence or the other saying no expert has credibility. I want to listen to what that expert says, see how it plays out with the field of experts around them, and then start to make some decisions. But that's not what's really happening. But we know from experts a couple of things. First of all, our student populations in higher education are now adults. They're not kids anymore. They're not dealing with that weird bubble that seems to exist with coronavirus and kids. They're in the adult population. If you look at how we striate the numbers, it's 18 to 50. Over 50 is another at-risk category, yes, but 18 to 50 is an adult population. A percentage of that adult population will get sick. Anyone from 18 to 50 will get sick, and it will be severe. And then a percentage of that population will also die. We know that to be the case. And that's the population that we're dealing with in the student population. That doesn't include the staff that are over 50 and have other factors. At the same time, we know that students really struggle with being cautious. They do not necessarily believe that they need to take care of the world or take care of anyone else. They're very focused inwardly, and that's probably a maturation state that we all can understand. But it's still true. Students don't think about the world very often. That's not fair. They don't think about the world sometimes. And when they don't think about the world in some of those occasions, in this case, it could result in someone else dying. Maybe not them, they may be fine, but they could certainly bring it to someone else, which means that healthcare infrastructure will struggle, not just healthcare in terms of hospitals, but think about your campus healthcare. Think about what happens as students are working in and amongst themselves. If they come back to campus and they go to the dining hall, and then they go back to their room, and then they go to classes, and then suddenly one of them turns out sick. Well, now what do you do? How do you contact trace that back to the dining hall, back to the dorm, back to the classes that they were in? And then don't forget about the staff members, the faculty members you do have who are over 50 and who also have heart issues or diabetes or obesity or any other number of risk factors. Somebody's going to die that didn't necessarily have to if we choose this. So in 2020, at least in fall, I believe if someone were asking me what I would do, I would go fully online. Now, I would say that for a couple of reasons. I would say it now so that faculty can go in and set up their classes correctly. What we've been doing for the last 6 to 10 weeks is not online learning, it's remote learning. Let's be very clear. And the experiences have not been ideal. We've been doing a lot of stuff on Zoom, a lot of stuff in ways that are not really scalable anyway. But tell them, you've got the summer to prepare your classes for a fully online experience, which means let's get you in front of some instructional designers and some architects of learning that will really help, really turn you into a better teacher overall. I've said this for 22 years, and I really believe it to be true. When a person is asked to put their face-to-face experience into an online experience, and they're given some architects to help them do that, they learn about learning. They learn about instruction. They learn about pedagogy and andragogy and teaching. They will learn things that will help them once everything does get back to normal. So make the decision now and just get people to start dealing with online learning as the medium really should be. Number two, go find the people who are out there saying, I'm not going to go back to work once things do reopen because I don't like the life that I was living before. I want to get a certification. I want to finish my degree. I want to get some sort of credential that will allow me to go out and get a better job next time. Those people are out there. I'm shocked that my Google searches, that my YouTube watches have not been filled with those messages over the last 6 to 12 weeks from universities and colleges that are saying, hey, now's the time. Now's the time. Let us get you back into the system. Let's get that degree finished so that you can really do something different with your life, so you can change your stripes. Go find them. At the same time, audit your programs. I know how controversial this is. I do. I read the piece, there's several pieces about the University of Wisconsin and what they're doing with their whole state system to try to talk about what they're going to do with auditing programs, to see those programs that probably shouldn't exist right now because they're losers. They're not making any money. Or maybe they should share them amongst different schools and colleges because, again, there's not enough to have 3 of some program in 3 different schools, but maybe there's enough for 1. I know how hard that conversation is, and the faculty are very upset and they're reeling, saying, no, you can't do that. That's a disservice. And maybe it is, but talk about it. Do an audit now. I have seen colleges where they have 3 professors teaching a foreign language that almost no students take, where 4 students graduate every year. That's a money-losing program. Now, if you have a reason to keep it, great, keep it. But if you don't, maybe now's the time. We have a bloating problem in our higher education system. Now is an interesting opportunity in order to possibly take care of some of that, not just because you can, but because you may have to. Without it, there's going to be many, many bigger, tougher decisions ahead. At the same time, now's the time to look for new business development opportunities. A lot of schools are going to suffer because of the loss of sports revenue. I know that, again, there are educators out there saying, hey, this is great, maybe we'll finally get rid of sports. Well, I don't think that's going to happen, but if you start to see the losses from what sports brings you in terms of money, you may not wish that ever again because sports brings in a lot of money to higher education. Because they're not going to be here for some time, now's the time to go find those professional development opportunities with police and hospitals and government organizations and corporations to try to bring people into other kinds of certifications, to show them the expertise you have on your campus and really turn that into a continuing education experience, to do something to bring money in. Open your dorms for hospitals that don't have room. Whatever you can do, now's the time to find some new business opportunities. And similarly, now's the time to look at employment. I know a constant struggle for higher ed is budgeting. And so what happens in many, many schools is they, instead of saying, well, we'll give $70,000 for this position because that's what the market really says that it's worth, they say, no, we only have $35,000 for this position. And so they hire someone at the $35,000 range who's probably not as qualified, who probably isn't quite as motivated, who probably doesn't have the expertise they could have hired. And eventually you get a whole population of people who you've hired that probably aren't the best people. Well, now may be the time. Is that a hard conversation? Absolutely, that's a hard conversation. But you're probably paying money to people who aren't doing their jobs as well or as effectively as they could, because that's all you could afford at the time. And now you're going to have to lose something. So some of the hard decisions are going to be around employment. And then finally, ramp up for what's coming in the spring. Now, what's coming in the spring? Well, it should be based on evidence. It should be based on math. It should be based on the models that we have. And it should be based on what happens in other places. We've got other countries that are going to start opening up to higher education, even K through 20. And then we'll start to see what happens when they do that. We believe there's going to be spikes. We believe there's going to be a tail to this. It's going to come back. It's probably going to accordion over and over and over again. Well, we have no idea right now, but we will in July or August. And if we wait until spring to open anyway, then we'll know whether that's a good idea or not. Rather than just putting our feet down and stammering and saying, but I want to open, I want this to happen. Well, sorry, let's make adult decisions here. Base it on the evidence that we have. Now, if we do go back, we can make some decisions around testing, what that looks like. Do we test at our institutions? Do we test on a regular cadence? And if so, we probably need to start ramping up to get that done. What about masks? Yes, I understand that the United States doesn't like wearing masks. Now, again, this really should be a math question, not a civil liberties question. That's just silly. But it's turned into a political one. I'm sorry that masks make people uncomfortable, but when I wear a mask, it can save you. And when you wear a mask, it can save me or the people that I love. And so that's really why you do it. It really can stop the spread of the disease. Is that something we want to require on our campuses or not? Again, the evidence coming out of fall should help us make that decision. Antibody cards, this is interesting. We don't know yet if a person gets the disease, if they can get it again, or if those antibodies will help them fight it off. There's some evidence that suggests that it may happen, but there's some anecdotal evidence that suggests it might not happen. Well, we don't know yet, and we may not even know until October or November. But by then, we'll have a better decision so that we can say, okay, you get a card that says you don't have to wear a mask. You don't have to get tested every week because you have the antibodies and you're probably safe for 12 months or 18 months or whatever it might be. We'll have a better understanding at that time. And because of the safety net that we're creating in fall with fully online education, we can go to that accordion model where we can go into hybrid moments when we have to. We can quarantine folks inside the dorms if we have to for a period of time and allow them to take their classes online while we get things under control, and then we start to gradually open up again if it comes to that. That's what I would do. I would let the math guide us. I know that we're not good at math as a society. I think one of education's greatest failings is not convincing people of the virtue of constant lifelong learning, of the virtue of looking at other positions. And I mean that on both sides. I know that there's the CNNs and the MSNBCs out there that are promoting, their editorial policies. There's the Foxes and the Breitbarts on the other side doing the same thing, and they're at war. And many of us are picking a side and not listening to the other. But that's part of what I'm talking about here. The math demands data, and that data demands looking at multiple things. Right now, there's a suggestion that the smallest model I've seen suggests that we should be delivering as a nation 500,000 tests per day to really be able to open up adequately. The highest model I've seen is about 30 million tests per day. Now, that's a huge disparity, and we should be able to now debate the variables that go into that. Unfortunately, right now, we're delivering between 250 and 270,000 tests as a nation per day. So we're not even up to the minimum model that we've seen. That's going to have to really improve for us as a nation to open up. Where your school is a microcosm of that. You may be able to do something like that with tests and testing, with masks, and with social distancing at your school on a smaller scale. But we're going to have to do that with a more informed model. We just don't have it yet, but we will. So, from my perspective, the way I'd leave this quarantine note is, let the math be your guide. Determine what those models are and how to fix it based on that. I hope this is helpful. I realize that my opinion and 50 cents won't buy you a cup of coffee, but I know some people are looking for those opinions. They're looking for different ways to think about stuff, and I hope I gave you something to think about. I really hope you stay safe, be well. I'll see you next week.